Are you feeling pain in your throat from singing or practicing? Does your throat just feels like it's throbbing or there's some sharp pains? If this is you, in today's episode, I'm going to be sharing, is this really damaging your vocal folds? And, should you be continuing to practice? Hey everyone, welcome back to the Singing Simply Show. My name is Ivan and I help adult beginners sing with more confidence. And on this show, we aim to demystify singing and make it as easy as possible for you because let's face it, learning to sing can be confusing. And so I want to break things down and give you some easy practical steps to move forward. And today's episode actually stemmed off the back end of one of our summit group classes. Basically every single week, me and my clients will meet up and we'll do this awesome Zoom session. And it's a great way to harness community, but also a way to share some practical knowledge because when one person asks a question, it inspires us all and gives us some more awareness on this. And one of the questions that came through was, I've actually been experiencing some pain in my throat when I'm practicing. Ivan, should I continue to practice? Is this damaging my voice? If it is damaging, what should I be doing? Basically, what should I do? And I wanted to share some of the advice that I gave to this client to you all because some of you I know are experiencing this as well. And so let's dive in. And before we even jump into some of the more practical things, one thing that's going to be so important to be aware of is this. Your vocal folds do not have pain receptors. Your vocal folds do not have pain receptors. And so what that means is there's good news and there's also some bad news. Good news is that your vocal folds are probably fine, unless you are making like really coarse kind of breathy sounds, like, these really kind of distorted sounds. If you can get a clear sound out with your voice, you're probably fine. Now, the bad news is there's probably some kind of inflammation or some kind of swelling around the vocal folds that we still need to look into or investigate. And so hopefully we've taken the elephant out of the room. Some of you guys are stressing mad out, like, hey, oh my gosh, is this the end of my singing career? I promise it is not. And so now that we've got the elephant out of the room, the real question here is, should we continue to practice? Now, obviously, I am not a medical doctor or practitioner, so any advice I share here is purely out of anecdotes and not specifically medical advice. But here are some things you can be thinking about, which is, does it happen intermittently? Or does it happen recurring? Which means, is it something that happens once in a while or is it something that keeps coming back? Because here's the thing, if it's something that's intermittent, you probably don't have to worry about it too much. The voice is pretty resilient and things that happen once in a while is completely fine. However, if it's something that's more recurring, so it's happened to you multiple times and there's almost like some kind of cadence to it, then it's usually pointing to something more systemic. Now, this might be something to do with your lifestyle, maybe how much water you're drinking, how you're taking care of your body. It could be that, right? It could totally be that. But usually, especially for singers, especially people starting off, it usually points to your technique. And a good way to even just double check is, does it tend to hurt after you practice? Is the pain usually accompanied by a practice session? Because if it is, it's probably something to do with your technique or the way you're practicing. And so if you notice that this pain is recurring and it tends to come after your practice session, right? Should I keep practicing? And my answer here is going to be really, really counterintuitive, which is I think you should. I think you should still practice. Because here's the thing, most people at the slightest bit of pain, they'll give up. They'll just stop and they'll completely give up. And I think it's important to rest, but I think it's important to not give up because especially when you're first starting off as a beginner singer, you're going to bump into some walls. You're going to be doing some things that probably aren't the best for your voice. You might be shouting, you might be going too loud, and it's going to hurt your voice. But the answer here is not to give up. The answer here is to learn from your mistakes. Maybe try something different the next time you're practicing. Maybe go a bit quieter. Pain is very normal in the beginning because you might bump your head against certain walls, but it's not necessary. It's definitely not something that you need to have when you're singing. And so this is why I often encourage my students, yes, rest up when you have that pain, but don't completely give up. Come back, practice again, try it somehow differently and see if that changes anything. You got to treat your voice as a bit of an experiment. And when you can do that right, you'll start to understand what is causing that pain. Is it maybe when I sing past a certain amount of time? Maybe it's when I kind of engage my jaw a certain way. Whatever that might be, you can only get there through experimentation. Now, when in doubt, please get advice. The voice is not something to mess around with. The voice is simply not something to mess around with. It's one of the most important tools that you've got, right? For communication, and you don't want to be messing it up. So, if you've tried all these advice, you're trying to get curious, you're double checking if it's an intermittent or if it's a recurring thing. You're taking a break, right? If you've tried all of these and you're still running into some problems, this is maybe time for you to get some help, because chances are it's going to be hard for you to resolve it on your own. And so I hope this episode brings some value to you. And I'd really be curious, what is something that you can take an action from this episode? Because the most important thing is, this information now, but how do I start to live it? And I'd love for you to write down, what is one thing that I can actually take from this episode and go and action? So apart from that, I hope this episode has brought value to you. If you want to connect with me, please do so on Instagram or my email. I'm going to drop a link in the show notes below. And I'll see you all for our next episode. Remember, you're not your limitations. Take care.